Our next speaker is Sydney O'Brien. Sydney. Prior to joining this program, Sydney performed research on octopod behavior in the Caribbean, publishing the first record of bipedal locomotion, the fourth octopod species to be documented to walk bipedally, as well as the only one in its genus and region of the world. The genus and species name of that octopod is Calistoctopus furvus.
Yes.
Maybe. During her time in this program, Sydney created a short film on women studying the deep sea and was able to travel to the Azores to immerse herself in the culture and management of a European fishery. And that's what we're going to hear about today. So the title of Sydney's presentation is Hooked on Impact, Behavior-Centered Design for Fisheries Management. Welcome, Sydney.
Thank you, Samantha. Back in 2019, I began working in marine research throughout the Caribbean, at first focusing only on fish behavior and population assessments of marine species like the queen conch pictured here, a large marine snail which people enjoy eating. One day, while analyzing the conch for microplastics, I was having a very difficult time removing the meat from the shell. If you've ever tried this endeavor, it's very difficult. A fisherman noticed my struggles, and while knocking this hole into the conch, he leaned over to tell me the story of the rare conch pearls. These pearls he would find almost daily when he was a small child, even playing marbles with them. His passion for being on the ocean hit me, the same passion that I had, but expressed in a very different way. He mentioned his struggles over the past years, in that now he has to travel further to find any conch at all. The ones that he does find are much smaller. And importantly, there was not a pearl in sight. He said that in his lifetime, the government had created a marine protected area with hopes of replenishing these species. However, since he has to drive through this protected area in order to reach the conch fishing grounds, he often wonders if he should just break the rules, fishing inside of this protected area. As I learned more about marine resource management, I thought of this interaction. I started to notice the ways in which fishers were either included or excluded from fisheries management and implementation. Developing legal policy and restoring habitats are two very important conservation actions. However, these methods do not ensure community buy-in or acceptance. At the end of the day, conservation programming relies on communities. Across the globe, this is a problem. Fishers are fishing down the food chain, harvesting smaller catch, and spending more effort. Because of these problems, we need to think about fisheries management efforts to not only support ecosystems, but fishers as well. Even though fishers know that this is a problem, it is not always easy for people to change their behavior. Fisheries management needs to be about benefiting the fishers, but how do we get there? Natural resource management is an issue relating to human psychology, not just the ecology of an environment. And there can often be a disconnect between programs aiming to encourage sustainable behaviors and human psychology research, because researchers often publish in their own respective journals with little overlap, and managers can have insufficient resources to search for and utilize this behavioral data. However, behavioral information holds a wealth of knowledge and is a vital resource which could be utilized to help develop more successful sustainability programming. On top of this, program managers often believe that people will adapt with increased information or behave rationally for their economic self-interest, but this is typically not found to be true. For example, it might be cheaper and more environmentally friendly to take public transit, but a variety of barriers exists which inhibits the individual from performing this action, acting on information to bring about a shift in behavior. My capstone aimed to bridge a barrier for managers in accessing this information by creating a guidebook centered around implementing behavioral approaches in the context of ocean and fisheries management. By supporting initiatives in communities worldwide and supplementing them with behavior-centered approaches, managers can promote more sustainable ocean management in an enduring way, leading to lasting change. I was able to visit São Miguel Island, which is located in the Azorian archipelago off the coast of Portugal, where I was able to build knowledge into ocean and fisheries management to inform this work, predominantly learning about their tuna and bottom fishing sectors. I was able to meet with fishers who eagerly showed me their tools that they use fishing and explained their skilled technique, like the hooks and line pictured here. I took the photos that you will see throughout this presentation, as well as the guidebook during my trip to São Miguel, as well as incorporating some photos from my past experiences in Caribbean fisheries. Visiting the Azores helped provide knowledge into ocean and fisheries management in a European context to inform my knowledge for the creation of this project. People know that they should make change in their lives, but change is hard. Smokers know they should quit smoking, and people know that they should eat healthier and exercise, but barriers exist which block these shifts towards making these healthier options. Program planners can use these concepts to guide people towards making more sustainable choices while the participant still maintains personal choice and autonomy. Speaking of change, I'd like to ask everyone to take off their left shoe and wave it above their head. And I want everyone online to do this as well. Awesome. So, in this activity, I can see which one of you are clear innovators, taking your shoe off before I even finish my sentence, eager and willing to try this right away. I could see which of you were looking around to see what others were doing before performing this activity, making sure no one was facing any negative consequences first. And lastly, there were definitely some of you who did not take off your shoe. Some of you who decided you would not because it was new and uncomfortable. The diffusion of innovation theory categorizes people into different groups based on their rate of adopting new behaviors, since people adopt them at different rates, even if people might visually look the same on the surface. People often move towards adoption of behaviors as they learn new information or are influenced by their peers. They watch the results that others achieve before they act. Just as in this audience, in any community, there are already people performing sustainable behaviors, people who want to be performing them, but on the other hand of the spectrum, there might be people that don't want to change their behaviors. It is important to identify and uplift people in the community who are performing these behaviors as important community leaders, but messages will need to be specifically crafted towards the right audience to meet each subsequent group, guiding the majority of the population towards sustainability. When visiting the Azores, I was able to learn about their pole and line tuna fishing industry, a highly sustainable fishery with minimum bycatch. These tuna fishers are clearly innovators, harvesting sustainable tuna while even participating in projects to remove marine debris like discarded fishing gears and line from the environment. Just like these fishers, many fishers worldwide want to protect their resources for themselves, their families, and future generations, but they might face barriers in adopting these more sustainable behaviors. For example, managers in the Bahamas wanted to address the issues of fishers catching undersized spiny lobsters. After meeting with fishers, the managers determined that the barriers the fishers were facing and crafted a campaign called Size Matters, providing size gauges to the fishers to help them measure the tails of the spiny lobsters so that they could avoid taking juveniles. This easy-to-use tool had a large impact. This led to one of the largest fishing processing plants on the island reporting close to 0 undersized lobsters being caught that year for the first time in 40 years. Providing this measuring tool made the desired behavior much more convenient and accessible to the fishers to encourage the action, one that supported the fishers towards sustainability, protecting the juvenile undersized lobsters, giving them the opportunity to grow to a larger size before harvest. With changing ecosystems, fish stocks, and economies, it is important for managers to help guide people through these changing times towards sustainable behaviors for ocean management. Many successfully implemented behavioral programs have key elements in common. Fishers might be uncomfortable having a meeting in a conference room or classroom, although this may be where managers are most comfortable. But it's important to meet fishers where they are to discuss management options. While learning more about the fishing sector of the Azores, fishermen eagerly welcomed me onto their tuna vessel to show me how they demonstrate how they catch their tuna. It is important to structure situations to make them easy for fishers to participate in knowledge sharing as well as management. Fishers hold a wealth of knowledge not only about catching fish, but about the environments they're working in, weather patterns, animal behavior, ocean currents, and more. This can all be helpful in management efforts. Through using these tools, program managers can design programs which better support communities, leading to better sustainability outcomes in ocean and fisheries management. It is a step towards inclusive management, which is an ongoing and adaptive process. My guidebook will help program managers to understand and utilize these tools in the setting of ocean and fisheries management, increasing community acceptance and buy-in, promoting the effectiveness of their programs. I would like to thank my capstone chairs, Pablo and Shayna, my committee members, Maria and Heidi, as well as all of the wonderful connections you have provided along the way. And all of this would not be possible without the MBC program staff, who have made this program a tremendous opportunity, which I will miss coming along. Lastly, I would like to thank my parents, Debbie and Bill, who traveled all the way from Connecticut, my sister, Jacqueline, who's here in San Diego with me, and my boyfriend, TG. Thank you all for listening. I can take any questions, and I have my contact information and a story map I created about the natural history of San Miguel Island.
Great presentation, Sydney.
Thank you.
So I know your main focus was in the Azores, but is this a framework that you would hope to be able to apply other places, or how would that look?
Yeah, this can be applied in many different places, and there's been, in literature, it's been applied in many different sectors, not just ocean and fisheries management. And there are common trends that people have in common, but also specific to communities. So it is important to be working with local communities and researching, doing surveys to really understand what barriers that community is facing. That way you can apply these concepts at a level.
Hi, Sydney. Great presentation. We've heard a fair amount of presentations today on the social, the people side of ocean conservation, which I think is really important and something that is increasingly a part of the conversation. I was wondering if you could provide another example of a tool in behavior-centered design and how it can be used to promote shifts in behavior.
Yeah, and actually I have a good graphic I can show for this. So, for example, these concepts can be applied in a variety of projects. In a project here, for example, a manager might want to partner with a grocery store to promote purchasing more sustainable seafood. And they could utilize two tools to do this. Let's say that through surveys and focus groups, they determined that people might not necessarily know what the most sustainable options are to be purchasing. They could utilize something called choice architecture in how they're setting up the display cabinet to put the less sustainable options towards the side or rear, averting them more from the direct viewpoint. And they could also use prompts as signage to prompt the consumer to not only move towards the more sustainable options, but to remind them to consider sustainability throughout their purchases.
I have one more question. What was the most interesting thing that you learned during your trip to the Azores about ocean and fisheries management?
Yeah. And actually, I put some photos at the end just in case. So I mentioned meeting with the tuna fishers. So I was touring a facility where fishers sell their catch. And while some tuna fishers were unloading their fish off the boat, they invited me on board. That way they can demonstrate hands-on how they're catching their fish. So they brought me up to that top platform where they search for signs of fish, such as seabird aggregations or ripples in the water that might show there's fish below. And then they utilize live bait in this industry. So then they would go and take the live bait out of the bait well. And then they utilize hook and line. So they're just catching one fish at a time. But they use this interesting method where they turn on these water jets, which obscures their the view of the fish at seeing them. So they're sort of hidden below. And then they catch the tuna one by one.
All right, thanks, Sydney.